pre-Geneva. Excited. Well, theme. It's the same theme, but you know how it is. Anyway, didn't want to get everybody going with that, and then completely switch topics for the beginning of the program. And so I need to deal with a breaking story right now. I hate to use that terminology because if you watch Fox News or CNN or any of the others, everything's always breaking. There's something breaking every moment. But in this situation, there is a developing story that came out within the past couple of days. An open letter was sent to Beth Moore by a number of women Bible teachers, specifically asking her to clarify her position on the subject of homosexuality. We live in a day where this is an absolute dividing line. It is an issue that is being used to divide churches. And anyone knows that over the past decade, the list is long of those who have completely altered their position on the subject of homosexuality, how it is viewed in Scripture. We all know about the Revoice conference last year, the one coming up this year, what's going on in the PCA, the very no offense intended or double entendre, but limp-wristed response of the PCA to the Revoice conference. The fact that's demonstrated that there is a really leftward thrust within the PCA today. We see names of people. Jen Hatmaker was a name that only a few years ago became very much associated when she shifted. And so many people are shifting in regards to homosexuality, gay marriage, all of these issues. It's not like a whole new raft of arguments have been presented. There haven't been. This is cultural capitulation. This is a demonstration of the fact that when the society comes against the Christian worldview at certain places, that people who at one point adopted a perspective because it was sort of generally accepted to do that within the church, all of a sudden the society hits it and they don't have any foundation there. And so they collapse and they adopt a new perspective. This is happening all around us. And so with that in mind, to ask Beth Moore, who has over 750,000 followers on Twitter, who clearly has a huge audience as a Bible teacher, but within what at least was once considered more of the conservative realm, to ask her to clarify her position seems rather obvious and acceptable. So the questions, in light of her relationship with individuals who have changed their views, the questions seem rather straightforward. Dr. Albert Mohler has said there's no place for any of us to hide. Now, he said that mainly within the community and the culture demanding of Christians. This is an ecclesiastical question here. This is Christians asking a Christian, where do you stand on this? Because she's very quick to talk about racism, and she has pictures of her palling around with Kyle James Howard and so on and so forth. Very quick to speak on issues like that. And she was just at the SBC talking about the sexual abuse stuff. So why would there be even the slightest resistance? Well, since that letter's been written, on social media, you're just being mean to Beth and so on and so forth. In fact, just a few moments ago, literally 13 minutes ago, John Stark, lead pastor of Apostles Uptown in Manhattan, New York, tweeted me, 14 minutes now, James, I know you may have justified in your mind for why you and others have obsessively gone after Beth Moore like this, but at some point you will have to give an account for this kind of stuff. Well, what is this kind of stuff? Here was my tweet. Ready, folks? This is the obsession that I've had. By the way, this is the first time I've talked about her. Yeah, I've been leaving that to others primarily. I've got plenty on my plate with other things. I've been watching it developing, but to say that I've been obsessive about this, Brother John, you want to find any of the programs I've done on this subject? Good luck, because really? Wow. But here's the obsessive tweet, folks. Ready? Well, maybe Beth Moore will feel it proper to clarify and respond? ? Link to the letter. Who's obsessing here, John? I think it's you, not me. But that's from John Stark. And what this is about is I was very surprised that, and where'd it go? Oh, goodness. Oh, there. No, that's not it. Maybe I saved it someplace. I don't know. I thought I had it in one of these sections, but this is what happens when you've got too many things here. Dr. Michael Bird, a well-known New Testament scholar, responded to Justin Peters and specifically said she shouldn't respond. This is a trap, like Admiral Akbar. No matter what she does, she's going to get in trouble. And it's like, I'm really, really, really surprised. I mean, here's the questions. You tell me how obsessive or mean or nasty these questions are. Okay? This is what we're being told, that we're being called misogynists for daring to ask a female Bible teacher that many people have put her name up as a future president of the Southern Baptist Convention. Daring to ask these questions. Ready, folks? These are terrible. I hope you're sitting down. If you're driving, you might need to slow down a little bit. Hopefully you've got some of that automatic lane correction stuff going on your car. Ready? Okay. Quote, with these factors in mind and knowing that millions of people follow your teachings, we would like to ask you, number one, do you believe homosexuality is inherently sinful? Number two, do you believe that the practice of the homosexual lifestyle is compatible with holy Christian living? Number three, do you believe a person who dies as a practicing homosexual but professes to be a Christian will inherit eternal life? Number four, do you believe same-sex attraction is, in and of itself, an inherently sinful, unnatural, and disordered desire that must be mortified? And number five, why have you been so silent on this subject in light of your desire to teach the Word of God? There they are. Proper questions in our day? Yeah, you'd think. I mean, anyone today in leadership. I mean, I can understand why people who want to be culturally acceptable will try to avoid these questions like the plague, because we know what the culture says. But these are Christian women: Susan Heck, Debbie Lynn Kespert, Michelle Leslie, Martha Peace, Elizabeth Prata, Amy Spreeman. And I've been told that there's someplace else where you can like sign on to this, something like that, that there have been, oh, here. Okay, there's this one has 139 more names attached to it. And so women attached to it. At least it looks like it. Looks like they're all women. Anyway, so how can we avoid answering questions? How can someone pretend to be a Bible teacher? And Dr. Bird, you're a New Testament scholar. You know what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6. You know the origin of arsenokoites. You know that goes back to the Septuagint in Leviticus 18 and 20. Certainly, you know the creation normative element of Romans 1, that leads to Paul's discussion of both lesbianism and male homosexuality. I mean, how can this be an Admiral Akbar thing? Have we become so much a slave of the culture that the worst thing you could possibly ever do is to answer direct biblical questions that might marginalize you in the culture? Folks, we are going to be marginalized in this culture if we say Jesus is Lord. That's where we are. So here's this open letter. And what I see are people running interference for Beth Moore so that she can simply ignore a direct question. I can answer all these questions. Dr. Bird, can you? Pastor John from Manhattan, can you? Will you? Openly, directly? I already have. Everybody knows. Wrote a book on this a long time ago. Stand behind it. Did a debate on this subject last year. Pretty straightforward, but I can. Why can't you folks? This issue needs to be addressed. The questions are valid. Given Beth Moore's association with... Look, if someone asks me, what's your views on the charismatic gifts in light of your friendship with Michael Brown? Well, again, everybody knows. We've debated it. But if I hadn't, I'd answer the question. So if you're bopping around with Jonathan Merritt, if you're doing what you're doing with Jen Hatmaker, aren't the questions valid? They're obviously valid. Painfully valid. So folks, stop running interference. This isn't obsession. This isn't attack. This is, hey, this is a vitally important issue. It's defining what we are going to decide is a hill to die on in the church today. And if you can't define sin, you got no hills left. You have no hills to die on. So this is important stuff, and I think it needs to be addressed. And so I wanted to address that, let you know what the questions were, direct you to this letter. You can find it fairly easily online. And I think a lot of people should be asking the question, Beth Moore, will you stand up and be counted? And all of you folks running interference for it, will you sit down and shut up? Because this is, well, or stand up and be counted. Answer the questions yourself. Be straightforward about it. How can, I cannot even begin to conceive of the lack of transparency that is inherent amongst those that are trying to say, oh, no. Don't answer questions like that. No. You're a what teacher again? You're either going to be a Bible teacher or a society teacher. You can't be both. You can't be both. So there you go. Hopefully that will be something that we will be able to discuss the answers to in the not too distant future. And hopefully they will be clear. And we can hope they will be biblical. That would be a really, really, really good thing. So I was reading from a website here, by the way, when I read the letter, Michelle Leslie. That's Michelle with 2 L's, Leslie.com. And that's where you can find that letter. So with that, are you ready, Mr. Pierce? Ready. You are ready? Let's do it.
Hear people that are Calvinists harp on this. God's sovereign, God's sovereign, God's sovereign, sovereign, sovereign. They just keep repeating it, and they repeat it so much you start to think it's a biblical truth. Jesus stands outside the tomb of Lazarus. He says, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus said, I can't, I'm dead. That's not what he did. Lazarus came out. So you mean to tell me a dead person can respond to the command of Christ?
Well, I can talk over your head like that. I know the Hebrew, the Greek. I've done theology. You can tell I know.
Do you really believe that it parallels the method of exegesis that we utilize to demonstrate those other things?
No.
Some new Calvinists, even pastors, very openly smoke pipes and cigars just as they drink beer and wine.
Even Jesus cannot override your unbelief.
You quoting a verse like that to him, you know what it would sound like if you were listening to it? He wouldn't make any sense to him. A self-righteous, legalistic, deceived jerk.
You need to realize that he's gone from predeterminism. Now he's speaking of some kind of middle knowledge that God now has to...
I deny and categorically deny middle knowledge.
Don't beg the question that would demand me to force you to embrace it.
You're not always talking about necessarily God choosing something for no apparent reason, but you're choosing that meat because it's a favorable meat. There's a reason to have that the choice of that meat.
And now, from our underground bunker deep beneath the faculty cafeteria at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, safe from all those moderate Calvinists, Dave Hunt fans, and those who have read and reread George Bryson's book, we are Radio Free Geneva, broadcasting the truth about God's freedom to save for his own eternal glory.
Well, there you go. You expected that. Some people will be a little bit disappointed, though, because of what it replaced. It replaced Read My Book. It replaced the last quote from the original. So, once in a while we'll just have to run the original just to remind everybody. Even though, sadly, with the passage of time, most people will go, Ergen who? Standing on what? Who is that? No idea what's going on. Gotta keep it fresh, because eating spoiled meat's not a good thing. So we got the memes over the past few hours have been great. Welcome to Radio Free Geneva. You know why we're here. On the last program, did you see Twitter? Eject, John. Hit the eject button. Yes, there you go. Yes, choice memes, definitely. On the last fighting line, we had 8 topics. We did 8 topics on the last dividing line, which may be a record. But one of them got things going. And ironically, it was only part of the topic. What I mean by that is we addressed, just briefly before the program started, someone, again, got me in trouble by linking me to an amazing clip from Layton Flowers. And I was going to be addressing something in regards to Roman Catholicism, synergism, etc., etc. And so I played it. It was 44 seconds long, and it was about choice meats. And we're going to play it, don't worry, but just to remind you, it was about Layton Flowers doing what Layton Flowers does. You have the concept of God's election in Scripture, but Layton doesn't believe that God actually freely, unconditionally chooses anyone. He doesn't have a divine decree. He just has this great calling type thing. But that mankind is able outside of God, independently of God, to do things that are completely autonomous. They completely originate in man. And so what he does is he's trying to respond to R.C. Sproul. That is a mismatch of monumental proportions right there. And so he tries to take the concept of election and choice on God's part and say, well, that word choice, we assume it means to choose someone, but like when you go into the grocery store, you go to the choice meats. Now, that's utterly invalid because it's based upon English, not upon Greek or Hebrew or anything. It's a specious argument. It's just another one of the thousands of analogies that Layton Flowers throws out to twist the scriptures, to get around what the scriptures are saying. And it's fallacious on its face. It fails on every level. If he were taking a undergraduate level hermeneutics or exegesis class, he should be failed right then and there. Unfortunately, he's probably teaching those down there in Texas, which says something in and of itself. So it was just bad. But what's interesting is I then made the connection to, we read this fellow that because of Flowers' stuff had started thinking about synergism, had been led toward Roman Catholicism. Thankfully, God was merciful to him, kept him from going that direction. But that stuff got ignored. Instead, only within, I don't know how many, 12 hours, 24 hours, I forget when I first saw it, you start seeing responses from Layton Flowers, bad form, accusing me of misrepresenting him. First, there was an article that was posted, then obviously an at least 1 hour long video was posted. And there it started. And he and I ended up going back and forth and back and forth. And he accused me of misrepresenting him, that it was out of context. That's not what I was saying. So I got the video, and I found the section, and I started listening. And it was perfectly in context. Smack dab in context. This man can change the meaning of any word that he encounters. Now context isn't what he was saying in the video. No. It's a much wider context. You see, we can't worry about the fact that in the video that's what he was saying, because if you take into consideration this over here and that over there, then it's not in that context. So, yeah, all right. Hopefully you don't have video, huh? That is not a good thing. You have to have video. We should have tested that, obviously, beforehand. So here is the video. So let's listen to it, okay? Let's listen to it, and let's hear what the actual context was. All right? This is his video. We didn't make this. We didn't edit this. This is what Layton Flowers put out there under no pressure. Here's the section.
As the Reformed view is called unconditional election, meaning by this that there is no foreseen action or condition met by us that induces God to decide to save us, but that election rests upon God's sovereign decision to save whomsoever he is pleased to save.
Okay, and that can get a little confusing because we could also say that God can save whomever he chooses to save, okay? The question is he saving people for no apparent reason, or is he saving people for a reason? In other words, is besides some secret hidden counsel that we can't possibly know about, some unconditional, reason that is not there? In other words, the Calvinists will often say, we just don't know what the reason is. Therefore, can you say with certainty there is no reason based upon our choices or our decisions independently of God that would cause him to show favor to one person over another? When we ask about election, we're talking about, namely, God having favor on somebody. Him choosing somebody over someone else. Matter of fact, whenever we use the word choice, a lot of times we're thinking of kind of the verb form of it, like I made a choice between these options. But if you go into the grocery store later today and you go to the choice meat section, the word choice there is used more as an adjective. It's describing the type of meat. It's the type of meat that is favorable over the other lesser favorable meat. And so when you talk about something that is choice, you're not always talking about necessarily God choosing something for no apparent reason, but you're choosing that meat because it's a favorable meat. There's a reason to have that the choice of that meat. And so the question becomes, really in this debate, is does God really favor some people over others? And let's just look at that question.
Okay, so does God favor certain persons over others? So was there a consistency here? What was RC talking about? It's on the little green board. Unconditional election. Okay, so let's go back and let's let him speak for himself here. What was RC talking about?
Arminian.
Whereas the Reformed view is called unconditional election, meaning by this that there is no foreseen action or condition met by us that induces God to decide to save us. But that election rests...
Okay, so there's nothing... We don't do anything that induces God to save us. That's RC's assertion, and that is there is no condition that we fulfill. All right?
Upon God's sovereign decision to save whomsoever he is pleased to save.
Okay.
To save whomsoever he is pleased to save. It is God's choice. Unconditional election. That is what R.C. Sproul was addressing. Right? So, can we assume that Layton Flowers is actually responding to what R.C. Sproul said? Can we assume that? I mean, if Layton wants to go, I was just playing it for the fun. It was just nice background stuff, gave me a chance to take a drink of water, no. Obviously, he wants people to think that he's responding to the great R.C. Sproul. So you would think he's responding to what R.C. Sproul actually said, which is about God's choice and his assertion that God's choice is not based upon man's actions. Okay? So far, so good? Why do I have to belabor that? Because we're dealing with Layton Flowers. And because Layton Flowers can change the meaning of any word he wants to, even when they're his own words in his own video. That's what he's done here, accusing me of misrepresenting him when the context of his own words is exactly what I said it was, without a doubt. Okay? Anybody that can do that, you've got to establish every single... I don't expect him to believe this. I don't expect him to... He's going to leave that article up. He's going to be quoting from it 3 years from now. I realize this is what you're dealing with Layton Flowers. That's just... Look at his videos. Look how many... I mean, the description that is given is former Calvinistic professor explaining why Calvinism is not biblical. That's former Calvinistic professor explains why Calvinism is not biblical. That's the actual title to his video page. And I'm on that video page all over the place. All over the place. Okay? So, that's what RC is talking about. Let's listen carefully.
And that can get a little confusing because we could also say that God can save whomever he chooses to save, okay? The question is he
How? I would be really interested in knowing how that works. Can God save anyone he chooses to save? How? Is he not dependent, in Layton Flowers' perspective, upon the autonomous free will act of the man? Does not God desire to save everyone? Is not God trying to save everyone? So how can you say God can save whoever he wants? How would that work? I would like to see how that would function.
Saving people for no apparent reason, or is he saving people for a reason?
Okay, now this very, very important. And pull that down for just a second, because I took the time. There it is. And let me go there. Oh, I don't like that. That takes over, unfortunately. Take that out. And if that's big enough to focus in on it, that would be good. Okay. I took the time to transcribe this whole thing. Whatever. The question is he saving people for no apparent reason, or is he saving people for a reason? Stop right there. This man claims to have once been a Calvinist. I have been contacted by at least half a dozen people, a couple of which worked for him during this period of time, who have said, no way. No way. I knew him then. He wasn't a Calvinist. He was, no way. I hope that's the case. I really hope that, because if he really was, then he is guilty of constant misrepresentation of his former belief. Constant. Every single video. It's that bad. No Calvinist believes that God is saving people for no apparent reason. What we're saying is God is not saving people based upon their actions, their fulfillment of any conditions or anything else. He has a reason. It is to the praise of his glorious grace. And that's the greatest reason there ever has been. That's greater than any human reason that could be given. But it's just constant with him. Just constant. He can't get away with it. Get away from it, because he has one understanding of Calvinism. It's an errant one. It's wrong, but that's what he's refuted. And that's all he can refute. He can't refute the real thing, so he refutes the straw man. There you go. So, is he saving people for no apparent reason, or is he saving people for a reason? In other words, besides some secret hidden counsel that we can't possibly know about. See, this is consistent throughout Flowers' material, is that he rejects the existence of God's decree. I don't know how God creates without a decree. I don't know what gives consistency. I don't know what basis he grounds God's future knowledge without that decree. That's one of the maddening things about trying to deal with Layton Flowers, and why I try to avoid dealing with Layton Flowers. If you listened to his encounter with Chris Date on Unbelievable, that was the thing that was so maddening, is that he doesn't take a stance. Well, Mullinism, and in fact, I am convinced that if the Baptist faith and message of the Southern Baptist Convention did not preclude open theism, if it left the door open for open theism, the consistent theology, especially his assertion that man in his autonomy can create actions independently from God, that is so in perfect harmony with open theism. I am convinced that if it would not result in his losing his job, he'd be an open theist. That would be, he doesn't believe it's heretical. He obviously has warm feelings toward open theism. And I think he knows in his heart of hearts, man, I wish I could be an open theist. Well, maybe he will be someday. But the point is, he doesn't say, well, it could be simple foreknowledge, it could be this, it could be that, it could be, who knows, He doesn't take a position. So it's easy for him to attack someone who isn't taking a position because he hasn't taken one. So we're standing over here on this hill that we have defined, and we say this is important, and he rushes the hill, and you fight him off, and then he runs off to another hill, and then you try to attack him over there, he runs off to another hill. You can't fight an opponent like that because he won't take a position on this very issue. So it's real easy to say, oh, no. You can't say that. Oh, no, you can't say it. You're wrong about this. It's real easy to do that when you are not yourself having the integrity to put a stake down and say, here's what it is. Here's what the Bible's teaching. That is maddening, but it's part of the process of dealing with this quote-unquote traditionalism. So hidden counts that we can't possibly know about, some unconditional reason that is not there. Okay. In other words, the Calvinists will often say, we just don't know what the reason is. To the praise of his glorious grace, the glorification of the triune God. If you are a Calvinist, you know this. But you are so focused, Layton, upon humanizing all of this. It's all on the human level. There can't be a divine level above your great intellect's understanding. It's all going to be on the human level, you see? So the Calvinists will say, we just don't know what the reason is. In other words, it's not a human reason. It's not a creaturely reason. It's not a reason that is identifiable on the nice little simple plane of creatures. But if you had been a Calvinist, if you had had any knowledge of what you believed, then you would have known that the much higher reason, deeper, more lasting, valid reason, is the decision of Father, Son, and Spirit to glorify themselves in redemption of a particular people through the incarnation, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit of God. We have a Trinitarian gospel. You have a human gospel. It's very much human gospel. All focused on man, not upon God's purposes. He continues, therefore, can you say with certainty, there is no reason based upon our, what's the next word, folks? Choices. Our choices. See, I had people running around yesterday, well, Jesus is the chosen person, and we're choosing him, and see, you're misrepresenting him. This is what he said, folks. Every single one of you running around on Twitter yesterday with your hair on fire, you're misrepresenting Layton Flowers. Look at his words. I kept saying to all of you, would you just read the transcript? I took the time to type it out. Would you read it? Not a one would. Nope. No, you're just a mean, terrible, horrible, arrogant, nasty person. Therefore, can you say with certainty, there is no reason based upon our choices or our decisions, and please note the next phrase, independently of God. Independently of God. This is the Flowers. We are autonomous creatures. We can create realities and decisions unknown to God. Again, how does God know the future? How does God know the future in this system? This is the very essence of open theism. That the free creature can independently of God act in such a way, and that's why God can't know. He would make the perfect open theist. And I think the only reason he is not. I would love to see, where has Layton Flowers put out a video on the errors of open theism? Is that out there, anybody? Could someone look at the soteriology 101 thing? Is there a I'd love to see the video on the errors of open theism from Layton Flowers' perspective, because foundationally, he's right there with them. He's right there with them. Independently of God. So, our choices, our decisions, independently of God, listen, that would cause him to show favor to one person over another. Those are his words. They are not my words. They are not my interpretation of his words. They are his words. That is the context of the choice meets analogy. And he created it. And he did so in response to R.C. Sproul, who specifically was saying it is God's choice, not man's choice. It's unconditional election. It's God's freedom. And he's saying it's man's freedom. It's our choices independently of God that cause God to show favor to one person over another. Those are his words. That's the context. This debate is done. Every accusation he made has just been proven to be an absolute bold-faced lie. All you got to do is stop the tape long enough to type the words out and put them on the screen. Stunning. It's right there. How can you... Pure documentation. Any of you can sit there and say, oh, you're misrepresenting him. You aren't living in this world. What color is the sky in your world? You are not dealing with things honestly or truthfully or rationally. There's no way to have a conversation with someone who, faced with this evidence, go, oh, nope. So, one more time. Our choices, our decisions, independently of God, that would cause him to show favor to one person over another. You know, when we ask about election, so he's unconditional election choices, he's conflating them. When we ask about election, we are talking about mainly God having favor on somebody, him choosing somebody over someone else. So he's putting choice, election, favor, he's conflating all of them. Matter of fact, whenever we use the word choice, a lot of times we are thinking of kind of the verb form of it. Well, let's stop right there. Yeah, this is why we challenge Flowers exegetically, and he answers with analogies. Because he doesn't do exegesis. He didn't do exegesis in the debate on Romans 9. He doesn't do exegesis at all. When he was on Unbelievable with Chris Date would present scriptures, he'd present stories. He'd give a scripture and then tell a story. He doesn't do exegesis. It ain't his thing. So here's the problem. The only meaningful way to talk about terms like election, choice, and favor is from the inspired words of Scripture, not from your analogies in English 2,000 years later. But that's what he's doing. That's what he does right here. Do we hear anything about kaleo? Do we hear anything about the substantival forms? Do we go into Ephesians 1 or Romans 8 and 9 when Paul says, I endure all things for the sake of the elect, the chosen? Do we have any? Do we go in there and look at those terms in the original languages so as to have some idea? No. Instead, well, a lot of times we are thinking kind of the verb form of it, like I made a choice between these options. But if you go into the grocery store later today, now, folks, I didn't force Layton Flowers to come up with the choice meats analogy. I had nothing to do with it. He's going to have to live with it. He's stuck with it. The memes themselves are so good. And I am going to Arby's after I get done here because they've got the meats. I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to take a picture of my double roast beef sandwich. I'm going to do it for two reasons. Because they've got the meats. Because yesterday, Jeff Durbin said Arby's is of Satan. There is now division in the leadership of Apologia Church over this very issue of Arby's. Jeff, you're just wrong. I have challenged Jeff to a public debate on the issue of the godliness or satanic origin of Arby's. And I'm going to prove my point today by going to Arby's. But I didn't force him to do this. I had nothing to do about him deciding, if you go into the grocery store later today and you go to the choice meat section, the word choice there is used more of an adjective. It's describing the type of meat. It's the type of meat that is favorable over the other less favorable meat. Now, would you stop laughing in there? I'm trying to be serious. Well, not really. I was earlier, but I just had to let the blood pressure drop a little bit. A, it is stunning that someone with a doctorate who teaches in a Christian school would make an analogy like this and not recognize the utter impropriety of not only switching verbs and nouns to adjectives, but pretending that doing this in English is a valid way of handling the Bible. Okay? There's no defense of this. There's none. It's absurd. If you're taking a basic level, graduate level, undergraduate level hermeneutics class, red mark right through that one. But this is Professor Flowers who's making that kind of error. And it is an error. Plain and simple. But I'm not the one. I didn't put a gun to his head and say, you need to say that the type of meat that is favorable over the other less favorable meat. I didn't make him say those words. And now he wants to, that doesn't mean, really, though, that God shows favor based upon us being better meat. Okay. Well, let's see what he went on. And so when you talk about something that is choice, notice now the description rather than verb, it's moved away. See, God doesn't do anything. God is controlled by man. Man makes choices. Man becomes choice by his choice. And that then means that God responds to man's actions. So when you talk about something that is choice, you are not always talking about necessarily God. See, he's still thinking God here. He's still thinking election. The context has not changed. Not always talking about necessarily God choosing something for no apparent reason. That is, God would never do anything based upon his own will, his own perfect desire to accomplish his own glorification. His God doesn't have that. But you're choosing that meat because it's a favorable meat. So we're in the context of the choice of people here. There's a reason to have the choice of that meat because it's better than the other meat. So the question becomes really in this debate, I think there's only one really. I think I may have typed that wrong. Sorry. The question becomes in this debate, does God really favor some people over others? Are they choice meat? Now, he might want to say, oh, no. I didn't mean that. Why don't you just come straight out and say, wow, that entire analogy stunk. I stunk it up, and you caught me. I withdraw it. That would have been the easy thing to do. But no, you had to double down. Oh, I'm the one misrepresenting. You took it out of context. Didn't take anything out of context, Layton, and just proved it to any semi-unbiased person. Now, I know there are people out there, they're watching this, and I don't like how he's talking, and he's saying mean things, and anybody who is controlled by their emotions, and that's a large portion of people today, I get it. And if they're the people you're going for, they're all yours, because they're not going to like anything I have to say anyways. But any honest-hearted person who is rational in their thought, that looks at the facts and goes, you said this, you said this, you said this. Yep, that's what you said. There was no misrepresentation. Period. End of discussion. It's done. Done. That's all there is to it. You can say, well, over here I said so, and in this video over there I said so. Then why'd you say this? This is the context. These are your words. These are your words. Now, as I mentioned, it really bothers me that Layton Flowers does not take a position on the key issues that would allow for an examination of the consistency of his own theology. That was illustrated in the encounter with Chris Date on Unbelievable. And that allows him then to emphasize this amazing idea that mankind autonomously brings about these things that are unknown to God. They're not under God's control. They don't come from God. How God can know them then? He must say that God can know them, so they're not really independent from God. I mean, Layton, can any person make a decision that God does not know? That God did not know from eternity? How then can that be independent of God? But he becomes very offended when you raise the reality that it sounds like what he is saying is that mankind has the ability in and of himself to make the kind of decisions and actions that will bring about his own salvation apart from anything God would do. Someone sent me this clip and I was amazed. Here is a clip. This is a fairly recent interview. Layton is interviewing Roger Olson, the Arminian. I mean, he is the essence of Arminian. Roger Olson will not stay with him. He goes beyond Olson. Listen to this exchange between Roger Olson and Layton Flowers and realize that Roger Olson is the more reformed of the two here. That says everything, doesn't it? They won't agree on this, but Olson demands there has to be, they'll call it prevenient grace, there has to be divine initiative. Who in church history argued against the absolute priority of divine initiative being first? His name was Pelagius. There's a reason, Layton. There's a reason why we say this. And you illustrated it right here. Okay? Here we go.
So you're saying my what I just said makes it a tactical,
right?
And yeah, I think that in polemics and theological polemics, tactical things are sometimes helpful to establish some common ground and to say, well, look, we agree about this.
Right.
Here's where we really disagree. And since Arminius did say it, I'm just saying to Calvinists, don't say that classical Arminianism is semi-Pelagian, because here's what Arminius said.
Right.
Now, whether he was right or not is another question. I'm just arguing from historical theology that they're wrong when they say Arminianism is semi-Pelagianism. Now, whether they're wrong when they say the traditional Baptist view that you're describing as semi-Pelagian, I'm not going to jump in and defend, the traditional Southern Baptist view as you've expressed it, because that's not quite what I understand Arminianism to believe. I'll let you and the guys you mentioned defend yourselves. And I think it would be helpful in this, what's the right word? I don't want to use any kind of violent language, but in this debate, in this debate, it would be helpful if we all non-Calvinists lined up kind of together and said, look, we agree with you that the natural fallen person is incapable of making a faith decision apart from a special work of the Holy Spirit freeing their will to say yes. And that comes through the gospel preached and taught and communicated to them. And if we all lined up and said that, then this whole accusation of semi-Pelagianism might just die away. And I wish it would.
Yeah, and I don't like the term semi-Pelagianism because I think it is kind of the boogeyman, and it thwarts a good discussion. And I can understand the desire to just avoid that discussion altogether, but in my opinion, it concedes too much. And I do think that, the fact that semi-Pelagianism didn't begin until Beza at least the terminology of semi-Pelagianism didn't begin until Beza in the 1566 or something like that. I think that's from David Allen's article on why Calvinism, why the traditional statement cannot be semi-Pelagianism, which I have at Soteriology 101 for those who are interested in getting to the nuances of that. He does go through that really in detail to explain that the issues that they are discussing originally between Pelagius and Augustine do not really pertain to our nuanced differences even in this discussion, and he explains very clearly why that is with references to original sources. But the reason I push back on that is to be able to say, I think we should be able to stand together to be able to say that we need the gospel, that the gospel is the power of God into salvation, not that the gospel plus some supernatural extra work that has to happen is the power of God into salvation. And that's again, it may be a nuance in the way we do it. I just think that when it comes to other issues of discussion, that may be a tactical side for me, is that there's other tactical issues that when you concede that point, for example, when you said that the person has to be freed. Okay, so a person could be freed and then not saved. What are they being? You know what I mean? So in other words, they can be preveniently graced and made alive or quickened or freed to some degree, but still refuse the gospel and be lost. So they can be freed and still bound at the same time.
Well, they can be freed and say no. And that's the essence of free will, that they have the option to say no to God's offer of free grace. But they also have the option of saying yes.
Right.
And without prevenient grace, they really don't have that choice.
But
so I don't, this is this is getting into the weeds, I think.
Yeah, it kind of is.
This ain't the weeds.
I guess I would just push to say that if somebody's in bondage, they can still admit they're in bondage without being freed from the bondage, like an alcoholic, for example. An alcoholic can still be addicted to alcohol and say, I am addicted to alcohol and I need to be checked into a rehab facility and submit to that without being freed from the addiction first. And in the same way, I think that we can be still in bondage to sin, but have the capacity to admit or confess, I'm in bondage to sin and I need a Savior. I need help. And therefore, to be regenerated through faith, not pre-faith regeneration, which I know you also reject the concept of pre-faith regeneration, but it seems as if there's some kind of regenerative work, or at least a portion of regenerative work that's happening on the Arminian structure. That to me, the tactical problem, I guess, is where I'm getting at, is that seems to make it more tactically difficult to argue against Sproul and others' version of this pre-faith regeneration, this effectual work of God that has to happen in order for somebody to believe the gospel, and that's difficult for me at least to get over.
Okay.
Okay. Look, did you listen to that? Did you hear that? That's extremely helpful. Was there something you wanted to?
I just thought it was really interesting that they were appealing to, I guess we'll call it Dead People's Anonymous. He talked about it's not like it's AA or something like that. They still can make, and it's like, okay, so we're back to the moral neutral ground, the prevenient grace, but then as far as the choices go, we're still, the people aren't actually all that dead.
No, of course
begin
not.
with.
No,
so we're back to he uses the AA analogy, and I'm like, well, actually, dead people's analogy.
Well, see, the thing is, we can agree with Layton Flowers. Not only is there just no biblical basis for the concept at all of prevenient grace, it's just not there. It is the cellophane tape of Arminianism. And if you've ever tried to hold something together with cellophane tape, it doesn't hold together very long, and certainly not under much pressure. He's right that it doesn't make any sense to have someone partially freed, partially regenerated, whatever, by some prevenient grace concept. That doesn't make any sense. But why is Layton saying that? Because he is denying that there needs to be any exertion of divine power to make it possible for mankind to savingly believe. Never mind that Jesus said you're not able to. No. We're going to run someplace to the Old Testament and find some place where somebody did something good, and that's good enough. We don't have to worry about Jesus' explication of any of that stuff. But once again, who's the guy in history that argued that we have this capacity in and of ourselves without the necessity of grace? We need grace because we need the gospels of grace. What he just argued, you just listen to it, is he's arguing against Olson because Olson is saying there needs to be prevenient grace. Prevenient grace doesn't save, but it brings a person to a position where they can make that choice. He's saying we don't need to be brought to a position. We can just always make that choice. Who said that in history? Give you a hint. His name starts with a P and ends with an agius. I just play them, folks. I just play them. Thanks to the individual on Facebook that sent me that clip. Because Layton, I just want you to understand something. You're watching this. You're recording this. You're going to do 3.5, 4 hours, 10 hours by the time we get done of responses. Repeating the same old errors over and over and over and over and over again. And I will not be listening. I have 7 other topics to be dealing with, like I did on the last program. And they're far more important. I do not listen to your stuff. The only reason I knew about any of this stuff is because other people do. And they send me links. You do live responses. When we're talking, when Jeff and I are doing almost anything, like with the Andy Stanley and stuff like that, you are obsessed with this. This is you are so angry, but it's an absolutely accurate description. One string banjo. This is your thing. This is what you live for. And your response will demonstrate that. But let's finish this up. Fact number 1. No misrepresentation. Context, spot on. From Sproul, through the setup, through the analogy, to the conclusion. Spot on, exact. No question about it. The words have been put on the screen. You've listened to them with your own ears. There is absolutely no reason to even waste a moment with any argument that your words were not clear. They were clear. You may be embarrassed by them. Very much so. I would be. You should be. The error you made of conflating choice in English over against the original languages, obvious, basic level mistakes. You're a professor, sir. There's no excuse for it. None. Now, one last thing. We started talking on Twitter the night before last. And he was saying, well, we need to get Michael Brown involved to reconciliation and all the rest of this stuff. And I'm just like, right. Okay. So you put out an article accusing me of misrepresentation. I didn't misrepresent you. Here's the facts. And now I somehow need to get involved in reconciliation with you. I'm one of the major, probably Sproul, MacArthur, Piper, and myself. You take those four, and let's throw Jeff Durbin in for the fun of it. You take those 5, that's 90% of what you produce in Soteriology 101. Okay? You are not 90% of what I do. You are not 3% of what I do. So, not even going there. So, I had been thinking, and I've mentioned this to a few people, I had been thinking about what? I had been thinking about a debate in Dallas. And so I posted the following tweet. But you are right. We do need to talk, but we need to talk about a desire I have had for a few months to set up a debate with you in Dallas. Here's what I wrote. Romans 8:28-34. You and I, no notes, no English texts, Greek only, exegesis only, 30-minute openings, March 2020, what say you? That's what I tweeted. Now, why in the world would I do that? It's a specific text. There has already been tremendous criticism of the last debate because one of us provided exegesis and the other one did not. I said no notes. You know why? Because I remember sitting here. I was sitting over, well, from your perspective, it would be that side, but from my perspective, I was on the left side of the podium, okay? It was from the speaker's perspective. And you got up there and you had your opening presentation in those cello type things. You know, it wasn't the type thing you put through the machine, but you know what I mean. So you had your whole presentation laid out, and you had your rebuttal laid out, and you had your questions laid out, and you had your closing laid out. That ain't much of an interactive debate when you've got it all written out beforehand. I had nothing but a Greek text. Well, I had an English text there for the Old Testament stuff. I don't think I had a Hebrew up there with me at that point. But I had no notes. I just went through Romans 9. That's what we were supposed to be doing. And so when I said no notes, what I'm saying is get away from all the pre-programmed stuff. Deal with the text. Then I said Greek only, no English text. And his response was, I don't know Greek that well. Well, then don't write articles where you pretend to redefine proegno for us. Straight up refutation. There are people taking seriously, because you're a professor, you see. So since you're a professor and you tell people that proegno means that God knew the Jews in the old days, he just knew about them. That's not what proegno means there. And it would collapse on cross-examination. And you know it. You know it. Proegno. Greek only, exegesis only, 30-minute openings. Because remember what the excuse was last time? Well, you only had 20 minutes. You can't go through Romans 9 in 20 minutes. I did. So Romans 8:28-34, that's a much shorter section. 30 minutes, plenty of time. He laughed it off. Laughed it off. It's like, oh, that's not even serious. Okay. Well, let's debate total inability. You already did that, remember? That's what the last debate was. You changed the topic. You don't want to do exegesis because you can't. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. So, am I understanding the look through the mirror, the look through the window there, that he actually called? He wanted to come on.
Okay, just to be clear, I think somebody punked him.
You think somebody what?
So I think someone punked him. He said that somebody had just texted him saying that we were inviting his call.
Oh.
So, I'm like, no,
What?
We're just about to wrap up the show. We're not. So that's why he was calling.
Sorry about that, Layton. I have no earthly idea. Well, you got the text, so I would talk to that person and say, "What are you thinking? What are you thinking?" Whoever that was, shame on you. Shame on you. Grow up. Wow, amazing. So there you go. Boy, I don't know where that came from. That's disturbing. Very disturbing. Better not look at Twitter for a while. Anyways, there you go, folks. I'd still like to see something happen. I actually, in a later tweet, said, okay, if you're not willing to do that, maybe Dr. Pritchett would be willing to do that. But I still think it needs to be in those parameters. I think people want to hear an actually exegetical debate. And so when I say just bring the original language text, how else could you then do the debate? It would have to be exegetically based. All that other stuff that keeps getting in the way, run off to something over here, this guy over there. No, let's just deal with the text. Maybe it's just my audience. Maybe this isn't your audience. Maybe that's why you might not want to do this. But my audience wants to hear that. They want to see that. They want to hear that. They want to hear the two sides going directly at it on the only meaningful and long-lasting basis for making a decision: the original languages of the text itself. So there you go. We'll see if anything ever comes of that. Whew. There's Radio Free Geneva for today. Today is Thursday, so next week looks pretty normal, actually. For about, I think may even be a week after that. I'm not sure. Maybe not. Anyways, July's coming, and I'll be doing programs from Colorado once July comes along. But thanks for watching the program today. We'll see you next time. God bless.